Hello and welcome to Casual Learning. My name is John Bannon. I'm your host. Today I'm going to review chapter 15 of my newest book, God in Our Superdeterministic Universe, the number one argument for the existence of God. This book is available on Amazon Kindle. Chapter 15 is entitled Original Sin. Original sin is a Christian doctrine describing the first human act of disobedience to God, as well as the ongoing fallen state of humanity, bound in enduring irremediable alienation from God. Christian tradition holds that original sin is the general lack of holiness into which human beings are born, distinct from any actual sins that a person may commit later. Original sin refers to the first sin committed when Adam and Eve succumbed to the serpent's temptation, commonly known as the fall in the book of Genesis. So if you go to the book of Genesis in the Bible, it's the first book of the Bible, and you go to chapter 13, lines 1 through 7, it says, "The serpent was the most subtle of all the wild beasts that Yahweh God had made. It asked the woman, 'Did God really say you were not to eat from any of the trees in the garden?' The woman answered the serpent, 'We may eat the fruit of the trees in the garden, but of the fruit of the tree in the middle of the garden, God said, you must not eat it, nor touch it under pain of death.' Then the serpent said to the woman, 'No, you will not die. God knows, in fact, that on the day you eat it, your eyes will be opened and you will be like gods, knowing good and evil.' The woman saw that the tree was good to eat and pleasing to the eye, and that it was desirable for the knowledge that it could give. So she took some of its fruit and ate it. She gave some also to her husband who was with her, and he ate it. Then the eyes of both of them were opened, and they realized that they were naked. So they sewed fig leaves together to make themselves loincloths." So this is the story in the Garden of Eden where Eve is tempted by the serpent, takes the apple, eats some of it, and then offers it to Adam, who also takes it. And that was the first sin of humanity, disobeying God, not to eat the fruit of the tree of knowledge. So this is the first sin uh, in the traditionally understood sense to be the original sin. Now, the Catechism of the Catholic Church states that the account of the fall in Genesis 3 uses figurative language, but affirms a primeval event, a deed that took place at the beginning of the history of man. Revelation gives us the certainty of faith that the whole of human history is marked by the original fault freely committed by our first parents. And that's the Catechism, paragraph 390. However, the oldest fossils of human beings date back 300,000 years, and they are found at a site in Morocco. Now, Morocco is nowhere near the biblical Garden of Eden, which was between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers in modern day Iraq. You can find that at Genesis chapter 2, lines 8 through 16. So, the fossil record and scientific fact indicates that human beings originated out of Africa at least 300,000 years ago. So this contradicts the Genesis Garden of Eden story. And this is why the Garden of Eden story should be read figuratively, not literally. But science does support the idea of a first human couple, because there must have been a first human couple at some point in the past, because according to the fossil record, humanity did not always exist. So you can adapt the Garden of Eden story to refer to the first human couple, the first human parents, back in time, at least 300,000 years ago, perhaps in Africa. Now, the first sins would have had to occur with this first human couple in Africa, at least 300,000 years ago, because only human beings are capable of sin. Because only human beings can comprehend the existence and will of God. And of course, um, you don't have to know about the existence or the will of God in order to sin. You just have to be capable of that. Now, superdeterminism offers this concept called God's omniprescience. And omniprescience means God has omniscient knowledge of all your freely will decisions under all circumstances or situations in all possible universes without ever having to have to create any universes in order to observe what you would actually do. So, because God has omniprescience, um, God would have omniprescience of the first human couple. So, even if they were in Africa 300,000 years ago, didn't know about God, didn't know about God's will, didn't know what sin was, nevertheless, God does have omniprescience of that first human couple and does know how they would freely choose to behave, for example, whether they would sin or not, if they knew about God and his will for humanity. So God can rightly just righteously judge human beings and even the first couple in deciding whether they go to heaven or hell based on what they did on earth as well as his omnipresence of the whole being of those people. So it's not a problem that the first couple lived 300,000 years ago in Africa and didn't know about God or his will. God has omnipresence of what they would do if they had known of God and his will. So, and sinning against God does not require that you know of God and his will. Um, okay, but did the first sins of this first human couple inflict their descendants with the inclination to sin, which is basically the idea of original sin? And under superdeterminism, the answer is yes. Dr. Hansen's version of superdeterminism proves that the universe is a static block reality without temporal causation or continuous causation in physics. He proved that in a peer-reviewed physics journal called Physics Essays, volume 33, number 2, June 2020, at page 216. Now, because the universe is a static block reality and there is no temporal causation, it is, and it's predetermined. It is generally strictly deterministic in nature. What that means is the past um, creates the future, but the future also retro causes the past because the future is predetermined. So, whatever the past is, it has to occur a strictly deterministic way such that that predetermined future will come into existence. It doesn't. It's not actually caused to come into existence because there's no temporal reality, but our experience of time leads us to the illusion that it comes into existence. But the point is that because the future is predetermined, the past has to be set exactly right in order for the laws of physics or the observed order of the universe to account for that future that is predetermined to occur. So, the genetic makeup of the first human beings must have caused the genetic makeup of all their descendants in order to allow those descendants to sin. Because future descendants of that first couple were going to sin, then this must retro cause the first human's genetic makeup to uh, strictly determine such future sinning. So the future sinning of these descendants is very much the retro cause of the first sins of the first human beings. And it is reasonable to assign blame to everyone for sinning because all have contributed to the existence of sin among human beings throughout all of time, both past and future. Indeed, the first sins of the first human beings would also be a retro cause of their own genetic makeup that allowed them to sin in the first place. So, under superdeterminism, because there's this causation, retro causation, in a predetermined static block reality, which is generally deterministic, then the past creates the future and the future creates the past. And they're all interlocked in one static block reality. So, in order for the future to have sinners in it, Adam and Eve had to be uh, the genetic makeup had to allow for that future sinning. And because that future sinning is predetermined to occur, Adam and Eve had to be genetically um, uh, made up to allow for that future sinning. So they go hand in hand with each other through causality and retrocausality in a superdeterministic universe. And in that sense, it supports the idea of original sin. Um, in other words, these first human beings really did have to strictly determine all future predetermined sinning. Um, some may object to God condemning people to an eternity of punishment in hell for only finite sinning on earth. So, one objection to the idea of eternal punishment in hell is, well, punishment in hell is excruciatingly terrible, but it never ends. Is that a just punishment for somebody who only sinned a finite amount of times on earth? And superdeterminism has an answer for that as well. And the answer is that God bases his judgment on deciding whether you go to heaven or hell, not only based on what you do on earth, but based on his omnipresence of your whole being. He knows what kind of person you are because he knows your freely willed decisions in all possible circumstances, in all possible situations, in all possible universes, even though none of those universes exist except for this one. But God knows your whole being. So, based on that, in part, and what happens here on earth, God can absolutely righteously judge somebody's irredeemable propensity to sin and righteously send them to eternal punishment in hell. The notion that Jesus' death on the cross was an atonement for original sin is that it brought humanity back into the grace of God. And that idea is actually supported by superdeterminism. The predetermined effect of Jesus' death on the cross was, 2,000 years later, to spread Christianity among 2.6 billion followers on earth. And if you include the 1.9 billion Muslims, because Jesus is the second most important prophet in Islam, that's 4.5 billion Christians on earth. That's the majority of people on earth believe in Christianity at this point. In the future, who knows what percentage it may rise to. So to the extent that Jesus's sacrifice and death on the cross reduced the amount of predetermined sinning on earth in the future, it has also retro-caused a new humanity that sins less. So Jesus's impact um, on humanity was to have human beings sin less. And because human beings in the future sin less, then human beings of today have to be uh, the causes of that less sinning in the future. So Jesus fundamentally changed the makeup of human beings to sin less in the future. So, in a really deep sense, you could say that Jesus' sacrifice did alleviate the effect of, or the permanent effect of original sin on humanity. Um, and that's seen through, under superdeterminism, hindsight is 2020. So when you look 2,000 years later in a predetermined universe, that future was predetermined. So that was the predetermined effect of Jesus' death on the cross. So you can start to understand the significance of his death on the cross in terms of what it has done. And in a predetermined universe, that's a perfectly acceptable argument to make, even though hindsight is 2020. But in a predetermined universe, that was what was going to happen. So the event 2,000 years earlier of his death makes a lot more sense in hindsight. Now, obviously, because we had no proof that the universe was predetermined without temporal causation until 2020, with Dr. Hansen's proof, um, then it's really no surprise that superdeterminism is going to set people back because they've never heard of it before and they're going to have to adjust to it. Um, but Christian doctrines need to be adjusted to reflect the new scientific fact about physical reality and the universe as a static block reality without temporal causation. However, as I pointed out, the concept of original sin can be readily adapted to the new reality of superdeterminism. Look, you can't change true scientific facts about the universe to meet your religious doctrines, but you can adapt religious doctrines to meet new scientific facts about the universe. Any religious doctrine that denies a true scientific fact is patently unbelievable and is not worthy of belief. So, when you run into a true scientific fact, like the universe is a static block reality without temporal causation, even though that's startling because no one's ever heard of that before, let alone known there was a proof of it, nevertheless, you have to accommodate facts about physical reality in the universe into your religious doctrines. Otherwise, your religious doctrines are not believable if they contradict uh, scientific facts. So I hope you learned something. Uh, Next video, I'm going to review chapter 16, which is entitled No Such Thing as a Self-Caused Universe. All right, everybody, take care.